Hi everyone, we'll just wait a few more seconds just for a few people to join us and then we'll get started. Okay, so I can start introducing it while people are still coming in. So hi everyone, I'm Ellie. I'm the content editor at Customer Experience Magazine and welcome to our webinar. It's an absolute honor to be joined by Sales Manago today. They're going to be talking all on fashion e-commerce and how to boost your conversions and sales. You'll be hearing from their carefully chosen expert speakers, Vinny O'Brien and Ashley Auld. Before we jump in, here's just a few very quick reminders that this webinar is being recorded and it will be sent out to all of your registrants afterwards. So if you need to leave this webinar for any reason, don't worry, you can hop back in later. It will be sent to your emails. And at the end of their talk, Vinny and Ashley will be answering some questions. So when that time comes, please feel free to just pop your questions into the chat bar or in the little Q&A box at the bottom of Zoom or comment on LinkedIn and we can read them out and you'll have your questions answered. So now it's time to finally start our highly anticipated webinar. So I'll hand over to our panel and get started. Good luck, everyone, and enjoy.
Nice, thank you. Great to be here. So I look after partner marketing at Sales Manago. I'm really excited to be joined by Vinny O'Brien. We've had so many conversations leading up to this. Vinny has a wealth of experience around e-commerce strategies, accelerating the sales, conversions, best practices, and works with many retailers in fast fashion, both online and offline. So I will let him crack on. So with e-commerce customer engagement, it's defined as emotional connection between a customer and a brand. Highly engaged customers buy, promote, and show more loyalty to merchants. So providing outstanding experience as an important component of your e-commerce customer engagement strategy. How do you recommend and what do you discuss with your customers, Vinny, around how they can increase engagement for their online business?
Thanks, Ellie and Ashley, for the question. And like everyone here, I'm delighted to be here. One of my favorite things about Zoom is when it crops your image like that, it makes my ears look 10 times smaller than they actually are. So I'm always grateful for the AI crop there. It's great. It's a big question, and I suppose for context for people, I work across multiple verticals. I've been in this space for over 15 years, and I worked heavily in the fashion vertical with eBay way back in 2007, and did that for a number of years. So I got to work with some of the brands, I suppose, that we're going to talk about today, and I'm going to talk through some of the stories. Today in my capacity, I'm here as Group Strategy Director for TRC. So I work with a systems integration organization, and we specialize in bringing automation through technology and other areas. But the other piece I wanted to focus on as well, to let people know that the relevance of this for me is that I'm not just I suppose a preaching consultant. I've part ownership of a direct to consumer brand myself, not in the fashion space, but in the outdoor space. We sell insulated tents, and I suppose some of the pain points and the areas that we're going to talk about, they're real stories that my team go through on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis. So hopefully there'll be plenty of relevancy there. And the first part of the question around brand or like customer engagement and what it means to people, it is a very emotive topic because loyalty is a really, really difficult thing to earn with people. So you find yourself constantly having to try and find ways to make that connection, and really the best way you can do that is through putting yourself in the customer's shoes. The other thing I would say, and we'll come back to this in a little while, is you've got to be curious. So I just watched a clip from Ted Lasso a little while ago, and it was about, you know, don't be judgmental, be curious. And I think it really summarized well for me what we sometimes do. We take the data, we make a biased decision on it, and then we run with that notion, rather than being curious about how it's happening or why it's happening. So I think I want to just come back on that, because curiosity is kind of a culture set that I think we should be aiming towards, and that's a really empowering thing for your team. But come back to the original point about putting yourself in the customer's shoes. One of the first things I do with customers when we engage is to do a mystery shop. So it allows me to go through the full site experience. It allows me to go through a search experience and to see from start to finish, have they really considered the things that I may or may not want to find out along that journey? And in order for me to evaluate that, I will look at the content sequence. So I will look at what search result comes. Is there a consistent messaging going through to a landing page? And then once I make the purchase, I really measure the post-sales communication flow. And it can be really enlightening because a lot of people will kind of get stuck on one piece of information to say, we've processed your order. And then, for example, you might be sitting there wondering where it is, or is there going to be an update as to when it can land, or I'm not going to be in the house on Friday. You know, I want to let them know to leave it with a neighbor or whatever that might be. And then when you receive the product and you open that box, have they done anything to make you say, I want to buy another product from this organization? And they're the sort of the touch points, I think, that become really tangible. So when I sit down and talk to people, particularly in the luxury fashion space, they will do a lot of work to make that unboxing experience really, really, really kind of key as one of those defining moments on the journey. And I really enjoy that part, particularly because so many people get it wrong, and it's an easy thing to fix and it's not that costly. Bit of a ramble there, but is there any of that you want to pick up on, or can I just keep talking?
No, keep talking. It's really interesting. It was actually making me think of the Anne Hathaway film, The Intern, where she is the CEO and she's really trying to nail getting things right. And people can't understand why each of those touch points is so vital. So no, it's super interesting.
Well, it's where you earn the right. And I read the pre-IPO prospectus that Allbirds put out in 2019. I think it was 2019. And in the document, they said that they had earned the permission of their customers to win a second sale. And I thought it was really interesting because what they were able to learn through digging into the information and talking to customers was that they had an ability to sell multiple times over 12 months with them. So they were making a connection through content. They were then backing that up with service. And then they were making themselves relevant for a further sale from that individual. And I think that's a really important thing that I learned. And in our own brand as well, you think about a tent, it's $2,500. It's a big purchase and has a lot of consideration around it. So you've got to start sequencing your content and getting the rhythms of it right. And I know we'll talk about that later, but sometimes we feel that we can't market directly to our customers as much as we would want, or sometimes we do too much of it. So I think in understanding where the customer sits, it allows you to put down a rhythm of the marketing that you want to get into. And that can be around, you know, we typically call it education, but it's trying to figure out what are those use cases that someone might have for your product. And in fashion, it's difficult because generally it's about putting clothes on or taking them off. And you may not have the ability to do the in the middle, kind of middle of funnel type marketing. So you've got to figure out other ways to do that. And I think social media has really helped people to bridge that gap and serves a really good purpose in terms of lifestyle curation of imagery and videos, and people can then see how products may look or hang off them, or you know, how comfortable that they might feel. And I think the tools that sit around that are getting better all the time for helping us maybe not just even have a look and see what the material might look like, but what does it look like on me? And that's what I see, and the use cases for things like AI and augmented reality experiences are becoming better, is what I'd say. They now have a purpose, and one of the areas that I can see it forming a really healthy part of our consumerism, let's say, over the years ahead, is in that area of trying things on before you buy them. But there's a retailer that I work with that doesn't really have the budget to go down there. So I know we've got to cater to different budgets as well. They don't have the budget to go down that route of AR, even though it's not hugely expensive. But what they did in their click and collect program, they have 15 stores around Ireland. They have a try before you leave policy. So if you've booked in a piece of an item of fashion, the customer service representative is asked in that instance to say to them, hey, we're going to ask you, would you try it on, see does it fit, see that you're happy, and if not, we can make a replacement for you straight away. And there's a couple of things here to consider. So I talked about that overall customer experience. In placing their click and collect areas within the stores, they then considered, well, where's the nearest changing room? we don't want it to be that you pick it up here and you have to walk 5 minutes across the store and 5 minutes back. It just becomes a cumbersome experience. So they put a lot of thought into those little things that now become big things. And it's actually quite a simple thing for the customer then to come in and get the item, try it on, decide if they like it or not. And they can remedy something at source then, rather than let it go home and become part of an operational cost that exists within the business. And I've always liked that practical workout that most businesses, I think, can come to. And again, it's down to attitude and mindset. And it's not always about the technology that sits there, but it's about thinking, how do we leverage the people and the processes that sit around it? So look, I think there's a lot of ways that we can start creating those bonds. Loyalty, as a separate note to all this, is incredibly difficult, as I said, to foster loyalty. And I think we get a little bit caught up in this idea that we're going to keep a customer for life. I think we've got to keep them to the point that we become relevant when they want to make a decision on another purchase of a product like our own. So, you know, Gymshark have made a really good job of being a performance sportswear brand that focuses solely on that niche. So their customers are getting more and more loyal. And some of the things that you can do in that space and look to are, you know, your lifetime value metrics. They sometimes feel like they're vanity metrics, but if you're using them in a correct way, they can be really useful for your business. And as I said, if you know over 2 or 3 years worth of data that a customer will make 4 purchases per year, that's pretty much 1 a quarter. And you can start sequencing your marketing rhythms to that person to say, we know that you're going to be in buy mode at this point in time. And you can start scheduling emails to go out to them. And I think they're the sort of sensibilities that we need to get better at, so that we're top of mind for our customers. Bit of a ramble there again, but I think it was worth the idea for me of loyalty is a real challenge. And I tried not to get people jumping onto loyalty points straight away, because it can be a bit of a false dawn. Other areas that I see people looking at that are subscription. So it's become very popular. I suppose the guaranteed revenue you're getting from it, it's never really guaranteed, and it's a difficult thing to achieve in fashion. What we see people do more so in that is maybe discovery boxes. So if you're a department store, you might do a quarterly discovery box where and this is an unusual strategy, but one I've seen deployed quite a lot, that you will pay $50 or £50 every quarter, and you will get a box of different items that come out that allow you to sample stuff and hear about new brands. That can be a useful tool that I see people using fairly frequently now as well.
I used to do the loyalty. I used to do the subscription with Stitch Fix, where they would do the 5 items. I think I did it for about 6 months with them. So, and that's interesting you saying about the stores that make you try on, and obviously like stores have had to tailor everything to people's convenience these days. So with that, with the investment in tech, how do you emphasize what innovation retailers should be looking at?
It goes back to this idea that I think we've got strategy wrong in a lot of cases. And by that, I mean, a strategy for me is diagnosing a problem within a business and creating a set of tools to fix it. So if you get that diagnosis phase wrong, I think you're kind of you're up against it from that moment on, because you're solving the wrong thing. So for example, with this one client that we worked with over the last 2 years, a UK department store, multiple outlets, you know, huge turnover, and they had a lot of staff and a lot of things to consider. So e-commerce was a pillar of the business. So they were transitioning to omni-channel, and e-commerce was just a pillar within it. And it would have been way easier to bring e-commerce into just the organization, not have it as a standalone pillar, but that was a separate discussion. The horse had bolted. But what we really looked at were the business problems, and the business problems were that they couldn't get enough inventory onto the website in time. So when stock was landing, particularly in fashion, every 6 weeks there was drops coming in. They didn't have a team in place to create the content. They didn't know how to get the data onto the website. And there were simple little things in there that we could fix, like they didn't ask the supplier for the data in time, and the buy was on a year ago. So there's enough of a lag time. So by identifying some of those core problems, it allowed us to reassess within that pillar, what are the things that we need to fix. As part of that, we looked at the cost of commerce in general and the cost of bringing people into store and the desire to get more footfall in. So click and collect became a major signpost to say, this is something that we can bring people in, we can show them more relevant offers and products and brands throughout our store. And then we can link it to, excuse me, our brand proposition on our website, make it a calling card. And lots of retailers have done this very successfully over time. Next, they're a great shining light of someone who can do it. You can order, I think it's up to maybe 10 or 11 o'clock at night now for almost guaranteed next morning delivery. And this has become the norm for them. So it's just part of the brand proposition with Next, and returning an item to Next is incredibly simple as well. But there's other areas, I suppose, that you can look at within that, and it makes it easier to change culture and mindset then, because you're talking about business problems, and then you're saying, okay, well, let's fix the process, and then we see, can we make it better along the way? And that's where I think the role of technology is becoming increasingly important. From my perspective, marketing is probably the area that requires the most digging on that now, because there's so much time spent in admin. There's almost a new channel opening up every week, and you're already overwhelmed with the workload to try and get content into multiple formats to serve all these channels. So I think when I think about the automation phase of marketing, it's really understanding, well, what does your content plan look like? Does your technology support it today? And if so, are you using it in the right way? And the tool set that you have for the business, are they designed for the skill set that your team has? So I think there's this, you've got to pay attention to the relationship between the people, the technology, and where it's going to be used. And that allows you then to get into questions with each individual department to see how they actually need to use this, and get them thinking. It's that idea of being curious again. Well, what is it I'm trying to achieve here? And it's easy in some parts of the business where there's a very defined function that needs to be done. And the best example I can give you is when you're streamlining accounting. You have to produce month-end reports that take figures from a specific set of places. And you can save up to 5 or 6 days of people's time by automating in that space. Yet we seem to have this aversion to trying to automate marketing, because it's seen as a creative side of the business. And there is creative elements to marketing, but a lot of it is actually the execution phase, or the implementation of campaigns, which is time consuming. And if you're not looking to ways to automate that, you're going to become very, very tired very quickly, particularly as, I suppose, something we might talk about, where we're getting into more personalized marketing and segmentation, and trying to understand at a more granular level, how do you serve the customer better with more relevant content? So for me, that's where that little sweet spot for automation lives and breathes. But something quite a bit about it, I'd imagine. Actually, you see it all the time with clients.
Yeah, one of my most frustrating things is when I get ads on social channels, and it will have specific dresses or like certain items, and then you click through and it doesn't take you to the same thing that you're looking at on the ad. It's really frustrating. And obviously personalization is key, but obviously businesses are trying to keep marketing as lean as possible. So when it comes to merchants, do you think they really understand the difference between personalization and relevance? And like, how do you think they need to understand that difference when it comes to building that content?
In short, I don't think they know the difference. And it's possibly because of the way that personalization has grown. And personalization is relevance to a large degree when we think about it. But because we've got this one-on-one relationship with technology and websites now, because of our phones, the expression has become about personalization. But it's actually about understanding the journey. The piece I said at the start, where you're trying to solve for someone who's looking for a product or a service, and you're just trying to guide them through that in as simple a fashion as possible. We invest a lot in outbound marketing and all the things that we need to do to get eyeballs on things. But we very rarely take that step back to try and understand, well, what is it we need to achieve? So examples of some of the areas that I would look at are when it comes to relevancy. This is where customer segments can become really important, because you'll have people that buy off you multiple times a year. You might have that customer that buys off you every Black Friday. You might have that person who bought once off you this year but hasn't bought for 2 years. And you're trying to figure out a kind of a micro strategy for each of those different groups. And by and large, when you look at your customer data, people and individuals fall into a cluster like that. So you will have people say it's very dangerous to try and group everyone into the same segment. But when you look at the data and you look at the behaviors, and even if we just sit back and don't think of our behavior from a work perspective, but what do I like when I go shopping? Like for me, I love hands off. I like finding the thing I want, getting out of there, and I don't really need too many frills after that. If the product arrives, I want to be able to call them and say, thank you, or figure out a problem if not. So that's the sort of thing that we need to get our head around, is that, for the behavior that we display, there's a segment that they fall into. And don't forget, like, marketing metrics haven't really changed in 10 years. E-commerce metrics of conversion rate have been stuck around 3% for 10 years or at least at this point. And these are the averages that we continue to accept. What I liked about the idea of relevancy, and particularly now where, as you said, budgets are getting tighter, we've got to sweat what we have a lot better. Conversion rates in the UK have dropped 5% since the start of the year, and acquisition rates have dropped about 5%. So it was about 71% new customer acquisition. That's dropping month on month, and has been throughout the last 12 months. Conversion rates have been steadily dropping as well. So it's now a challenge for us. So we do have to do something to create better experiences. And that's where the idea of relevancy kicks in. So if I expand fashion to beauty, for example, my wife worked in with a skincare brand for a long time, and she used to spend, I think, 300 or 400 quid on this little tub, and it infuriated me to think, and that's a ridiculous thing to say, but it infuriated me to think that she'd spend so much in this moisturizer. But when she broke it down, and this was the marketer coming at her, she said it cost about 3 cents per day if it was used properly. So that got me thinking about the rhythm of marketing. So if we have a customer with two scenarios, someone who might take 12 months to use that is using it too sparingly. Someone who's using too much of it, and you might be happy on the revenue side. You see Vinny's bought 3 of those pots in the last 3 months. They're misusing the product as well. But what happens there is they're not getting the results that they should be. So as the owner of that cluster, you should be saying they're in our top 1% of best customers, but actually they're using this wrong if they're actually using that much product all the time. So let's not send a generic email to this person. Let's send, pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, did you know you're probably using this wrong? We wanted to give you the opportunity to correct that. Now, that might seem cumbersome and time consuming and all those things, but these are the sort of little wins that we're now getting into. But where I see that being influenced in terms of automation, if I go back to our own website, we would see a spike in our traffic and conversion, and a drop in conversion in the evening time, because we're an Irish-based business selling in the US for the most part. So when our customers need someone to be there to answer queries on product because it's highly technical, we just don't have someone there. So the challenge we've taken on over the last month or so is to have an employee in situ in the US to be on live chat. And what we've done from a technology perspective, and I suppose this is one of the tips that I would see, because we get repeat customers coming back, repeat browsers coming back over and over again. And you think to yourself, how can I do something to make it better? So we've kind of put this rule together to say, if a customer, or if a potential customer visits the site more than, let's say, 3 times over 2 days, and they visit more than 4 pages, that's an indicator that they're trying to figure something out. So we will then engage our live chat to pop up with a person on the end of it to say, hey, Ashley, Vinny here, just wondering, is there something that we can help you with? And because the footprint is there, and that's what I mean about relevancy and the analytical side of this. And this is where we've got to be more curious on what's going on our sites. And, we need to spend as much time in that space as we do on outbound marketing. So with that in mind, and I've said this before, there's 2 kind of core skills that I think are going to become really important to us as commerce owners over the next couple of years, and very much in particular in fashion: merchandising. So what happens when someone comes on the site? Have you given them enough options? And I'll give you a good example of that in a sec. And then the other one is around being curious about the data. So I think as marketers, we kind of have to go backwards. So what marketing is around, it's the science of what's happening when we create that experience. And to bring that all back, if we don't do that, we will never create that emotive experience that we talked about at the start. What we will just do is push our message out there as much as we think is necessary without ever sound checking with someone. And it can be very, very frustrating, and it can be a tough thing to overcome as well. So that's a culture shift. I think we need to see more of those roles creeping into the organizations that we work with.
Yeah, and going like with the backwards approach, what is your opinion on brands like Primark, for example, who haven't touched the e-commerce space, still seeing sales increasing? Do you think they will go online and change their approach, or they'll stay in that mentality of bricks and mortar?
I hope not. I have this view. I sound like a grumpy old man right now, and I suppose I am compared to most people in the industry these days. But I think e-commerce has got to evolve. I think we've got to figure out different ways to do it. And I spoke to an independent retail group at their internal conference a little while ago, that they had all their buying partners in there. And that was my message to them, because they've been told for 10 years that everybody needs to be in e-commerce, but it's e-commerce the way we traditionally think about it. What I love about Primark is that they've decided there is a way that they can engage with technology and give their customers the ability to do certain aspects of e-commerce. They've done the unit economics for a long time. They've hired external consultants to come and look at it, and it just doesn't work out. And when we look at all of the media coverage this year about the move to profitability, it's absolutely right. We need to try and get there. But that means we've got to take a really hard look at what type of commerce do we want to engage in. You know, there's going to be businesses that emerge in the next 4 or 5 years with a TikTok shop only, and they won't need, you know, a Shopify connector. And that's been a recent development over the last couple of days, that it's going to be possible to run your business through TikTok in its entirety now. And we've got to figure out through those profitability checks how we do that. So I love that Primark have kind of resisted the temptation to bring everything online. It would be an absolute nightmare. I couldn't imagine what the return scenario would look like. And it would probably devalue the stores for them as well, because you know yourself, you go in there, you just fill a basket, you don't even know what's in it. And you know, it's a very, very good business model that they have. So I would not like to see them go down the track of going into commerce as we see it, because for all the reasons I just said.
Yeah, no, I like a bit of old school. I know, so 10 years ago, I was working in a managed service in e-commerce, and we had a lot of fast fashion retailers. And I remember when House of Fraser like first launched free returns, and everybody was talking about it. So obviously you've got that innovation, and yeah, you need to evolve, and everyone's now talking a good game on sustainability and having like effective ESG messaging. But how many brands do you think are using it more as a marketing ploy? And do you think a lot of retailers that you're talking to do have a clear sustainability plan and are really driving that message to their end users, that convenience is actually costing them as a business and costing the planet ultimately?
Yeah, I have a few strong views on this. Look, I think for the most part, brands are not trying to greenwash. I think they're genuine and trying to get messaging out there and make little changes. But the most startling statistic I saw over the last few months of research, in the top 1,000 fashion brands across Europe, and that was a report done by RetailX, they said that only 12% of companies or brands in that space have a published CSR or ESG policy. If you haven't gone to the trouble of creating that policy, to me, you don't really have a policy in place to say that you're sitting over something that's classified as sustainability. The word sustainable for me is a bit like personalization. It's a little bit too catch-all. I worked with a wine producer who said they had a sustainable wine company, and I said, what does that mean? And they said, well, every step of the process we use the byproduct to create something else. And I said, would you not just say that to people? It means more, it's tangible, it's relevant. And it just meant that you could get the idea that there's something different about the way that we produce wine versus a big wine producer. Therefore, we feel that there's something there. And when I talk about policies, I think it's important to consider them as a part of your strategy, to make sure you've got solid policies in place for sales distribution. For example, it stops internal friction, it provides margin control, in the same way that sustainability it's not going to be taken seriously unless we put down accountability metrics against it. And this, I suppose, is where technology can help on the merchandising side of it. And we've talked about relevancy to get selection better. But when you take that selection, and if you look at some of the big clothing producers, they could reduce their production to be more in line with consumption, because it's reasonably well known that there's a lot of clothing goes to landfill. When I did the numbers this morning, the most up-to-date one was 336,000 tons of clothing goes to landfill on an annual basis. But a lot of that is planned into the manufacturing. So when they're designing the next line for Primark or kind of, I'm sorry, not singling them out saying they're doing this practice, but it's quite common that to build in a buffer so that you might hit a stretch target. So we're already we're going to continue to lose on the sustainability front, or the kind of the corporate and social responsibility, if we don't start using the information that's presented to us to change something about it. And you know, Shine, love them or hate them, they are standing over their message that is, because we've got local producers out there and local manufacturers, we're doing more real-time type production. And I can see some of that creeping in over the next few years, that we may have to wait more than 24 hours to get a t-shirt or a jumper or the last minute Christmas gift. And is that such a bad thing? You touched on it a while ago. I've never been a huge fan of free returns and free delivery for my clients, because it doesn't make any sense. Like, if we went into a shop, we'd incur all the costs and we wouldn't even think about it. So for me, moving the needle back on that would be really interesting. So I remember when we first did it at eBay, it was, you know, it was then adopted by a lot of people, but to me, it's not right. Amazon and companies of that size have created this really unequal platform when it comes to how we design policies. And it's the same for sustainability. It's really hard for small producers to stand over a supply chain that is really unknown to them. They don't know how to measure things like carbon footprint. And so the messaging then becomes a little bit forced. And again, going back to that emotive side of things, it's really difficult to stand over then. So I've this, I suppose, fear of what sustainability could become. But I think if we start with policy making, as boring as that sounds, we actually can do something quite useful. And that can be down to technology choices. You know, we want to work with partners who are cloud-based. You know, that might seem like a silly thing, but there's still a lot of physical server space out there and infrastructure in place. Is the cloud more or less better? And I'm not saying I have the answer there, but these are the sort of decisions that we can make if we have very clear policies in place. And that has to start at a much higher level. I worked with Calvin Klein Golf for a number of years. In 2015, I think it was, or 16, they released a policy. They released a statement to all of their contracted partners all around the world and said by, I think, 2020, they had to have a corporate and social responsibility policy that they could read and hold and be tangible with. And then they also wanted them all to rank themselves based on a scorecard they gave them, and that was measured every year. So you had 4 years to get yourself up to scratch to achieve certain things. And some of the areas that I saw that were simple, that at the time we changed the warehouse light bulbs and we went to non-gas based light bulbs, and they turn on when you're in a room and they turn off when you're not. So I think, you know, there's practical things that we can do once we have a policy structure in place. And I think it brings your team along as well, because, you know, they might actually say, well, I want to be part of a tree planting program, or I want to do X, Y, or Z. But I think it can bring people along as well.
Yeah, I know my mother and a couple of my friends are the worst people for ordering everything next day, free delivery, spend €1,000 and literally send everything back. And it infuriates me, because I know how e-commerce brands work, what the e-commerce journey is, how you can personalize, and you are actually a cost to that business, and are affecting obviously their profits. But like you say, you need to have a resonating message so your end buyers actually understand that, because you're the one that's built the convenience model for them. And that obviously comes on to like effective marketing rhythm, which I know you touched on with your wife's very nice cream.
Yeah. She has great skin, though. I'll give her that.
Well, at least you know it works, because she buys the right amount. So could you explain for our users just the concept of marketing rhythm and its relevance for their businesses?
I'm going to give everyone a new metric today if they haven't used it before, and I'm excited about that. It's going to be a new KPI. Go me. The marketing rhythm is kind of based on the old catalog model of recency, frequency, monetary value. And a lot of the time we're challenged by our finance team to say, you're spending how much this month in marketing and what's our ROAS? And, we get so exhausted answering that question over and over again, because they're not really, they're very hard to get consensus on what is good performance and what is bad. So what I started looking at was on that basis of the marketing rhythm. So how frequently are we marketing? How relevant in terms of your likelihood to consume the product is the type of marketing that we're doing, and the messaging then that sits with that. So what I started looking at was the time between purchases. And I looked at this at kind of different customer segment level. So if we've got a kind of a product or a customer group that will buy multiple times over the year from us, and they have, let's say, 52 days between purchase, I would set the task for my team would be to reduce that to maybe 40 days in the first year, and then we try to get to sub 30 days in year 2. And there's a couple of reasons. If we're doing our job right and it's a consumable product like that, we're almost on subscription style rhythm at that point. So we got that frequency up. We also have opportunities to upsell. So again, I think if you're doing this kind of messaging right, you will get bigger baskets, higher average order values, and you're increasing the likelihood of profitability. But the area that I failed to realize, I think, earlier in my career, was that if we're cycling cash quicker, or we're reducing that time between purchases, we're cycling cash into the business quicker. So when it comes to having that discussion with our head of finance or a CFO, you're saying, well, actually, one of the things we're trying to do for you is we're trying to reduce the time between purchases to get that money back in. And I think then ROAS actually has a more important role in your analysis at that point, because there's no longer a lag between when you spend the money and when it's accounted for on a month-to-month basis. So you can sit down and say, well, actually, our marketing is getting so much better and more effective because of that rhythm that we are now in. And we're turning our money quicker, and we're increasing our ROAS on an ongoing basis. So that allows you to get the recency and the frequency right. And the more you do that and provide good service and everything that sits around it, that monetary value and lifetime value of the customer that sits with you can really start moving on as well. So I think that rhythm of all of that is something that I would encourage people to look at. So it's the time between purchases is really key. Layered on top of that, and you will get this data in plenty of places, you've also got the idea of your relationship length with your customer. So maybe you don't have a high frequency product. So taking fashion as an example, maybe you sell dresses for cocktail parties at Christmas, and then you really struggle after that, or there might be another point in time that you want to be able to sell to someone. If you can go in and do that analysis and you see, we generally have 180 days with this customer segment to do something with them to get a second sale, or the likelihood is they become passive, or they move on, or they've gone to another brand. So looking at that relationship length across the customer groups allows you to say, okay, we need to provide something different here within these groups to grease the wheels with them a little bit, and say, we want to maximize the sales within that relationship period. Ultimately, as you do that, you also want to increase that relationship length with them, to say that we want someone to almost have an infinite number of days between when they're likely to become passive or not. So in doing that again and achieving all the things that we said, you're giving yourself a better chance that that customer will stay with you for a much longer time period as well. So there are two really kind of key areas that I would look at. Now, to facilitate that, you've got to get really good at automating your marketing, because you're going to be segmenting so much. You're going to have to create a lot of content to sit in there, and then you're going to have someone to measure all of this and see, are things being effective? So automation at that point to me is really important, whatever way you want to set that up. But that will be a lot of emails with triggers. It might be form captures on websites. It might be automation that you set up through social and things like that. So I think you've really got to plan that journey out. One of the things that we probably don't do that we used to was, if you sit down with a pen and paper and actually draw that journey out. And it's actually quite a fun experience to do, to go, well, actually, here's all the touch points that we need to put in place to make that one campaign happen. And I guarantee if you do that, every single time you go to launch a campaign, you will have a better success rate off the back of it, by just drawing that journey out and spending the time to sit in the customer's shoes and see where is it that they want to go with that. And there are mapping tools out there as well. I know that you can use and deploy. And that becomes increasingly important as we move to a more omni-channel environment, because you've got to think outside of your own sphere of expertise, and you've got to bring people in from other teams. And all the time, this is becoming a more inclusive process. and you learn more about your customers. And one of the most valuable things, when I left eBay, I had no retail experience. Well, I worked in a butcher's from when I was 11 or 13, I think. But I've always been in that space of being around customers, and I really enjoy the buzz around it. But those retail sensibilities had left me in e-commerce, and particularly in eBay, because it was such a big machine. And you were a singular marketplace, you didn't get those sensibilities. So I left and I joined a department store in Dublin, here in Ireland, called Arnott's, and they were famed for the experience and the way that people got treated. But there was so much knowledge and expertise in the team that existed there, and little nuanced things about when customers come in and how they behave and things that they ask for. You just have got to factor those things in, and they were so valuable to me in my learning during that time in Arnott's.
Yeah, and it is connecting the campaigns to the customers, and obviously the advertising to the your unknown visitors and audience as well.
Well, to that point that you made, it's surprising how infrequently that happens. Like, campaigns usually don't have a flow right through to the website. Is the big challenge I have with clients, I suppose, and I don't know if you see this, Ashley, but it's on that landing page measurement. So happy to do a campaign, but we recommend these 3 changes on page. Do you get a lot of pushback on those types of CRO requests with customers?
Yes, and I think it's, I mean, running a customer engagement platform, and actually really trying to explain to merchants what personalization and relevancy looks like, and actually understanding what the channel advertising needs to look like on each platform. Like you say, there's so many different channels people are buying through now, how you actually measure that. I think AI is a huge one, where everybody needs to actually personalize. You can tell what's written by an AI generated tool these days. And I think it's e-commerce businesses really trying to understand who are those unknown visitors, what channels are they coming from, what's working. But also, obviously, it's easier if you're a smaller brand, obviously you don't have as much money, but it's easier to personalize and make campaigns more relevant if you've got 5,000 to 10,000 people in a database.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you start with customers if they're kind of got, I don't know, 200,000 people come into their website, and try and explain personalization and different technologies to them when there's like that vast number of people?
It's difficult. I would say that. I suppose it goes back to putting yourself back to what it is one individual customer might be trying to do. And the best example I've seen of it in the last few months was with Walmart. Actually, they have this merchandising layer that, when I talked to the team, that was really, really impressive. And what they looked at was the customers that were coming shopping at different times of day. So they realized in the morning for pet food that a specific type of customer comes and they like value and convenience. They want to see best value, and they want to see the one that's going to be delivered to them that afternoon, so they could feed their pet when they go home. So the merchandising layer between 7 and 9 a.m. was really different relative to what they had, say, from 10 to 12, where they had browsers. So what they were able to then curate at that point was different layers of navigation that provided, a good, better, best model. So manager special, here's the premium, here's the low value. And they would see a much lower conversion, but a much higher engagement in terms of people going through different pages and checking out the information. And with those customers, then they were able to kind of articulate to the rest of the business, we need to provide more information to make that purchase decision easier. And throughout the day, they started layering all of this information up. But where that went out of the business was they were then able to design campaigns linked to the time of day, to the merchandising layer on the website, so that now they had this joined up thinking. They used internal technology to do that. But there are off-the-shelf products that you can get, as you know, to allow you to start saying, well, why don't we just test this? Our conversion rate during the day is dreadful anyway. We're not doing any form of A/B testing. And you know yourself with customer data, and as you said, if you've got 200,000, you really do have to segment at that point to create an understanding of what people are coming in to do. And you can use those lists and upload them onto your marketing channels. You can do it with your automation software as well. So you can create these micro groups that take out that overwhelming feeling about managing data of that size, and starting to break it down into bite-sized chunks. And for me, if I go back to that metric I mentioned, you're trying to get people to buy more often, spend more and more frequently. And when you break it down like that, if you look at your customer groups, you're going to have your shoppers who you want to analyze in a lot of detail. But in the area that I think people can spend time right now, regardless of size, it's on the people who don't buy. And you've said that so many people come to the site, they leave, and we don't ask them why they're leaving. And that can be a negative thing. And it's trying to create the case to just do that testing. And to be honest, I don't think these days that you need to be a technology wizard to put these tests in place. You know, the technology providers, as yourselves, you make it so easy and intuitive to say, okay, answer these 4 questions and you're going to have a campaign live. Give us an image and we can A/B test, or give us 2 images and we can split test this to see, does this one work or does this one work? And I think it's important to try and get into that mentality of, okay, let's figure out what we want to achieve. Let's look at the customers that are behaving in a way we understand today. And then let's be curious about those customers that we don't understand, and let's start asking some questions about them.
Yeah, and I've had this conversation with a few merchants where obviously, like, you go to any of the big e-commerce platforms, like the kind of more popular ones like Shopify, BigCommerce, you go to their marketplaces, there's so many technologies that they're integrated with, that's all out of the box, so super easy to integrate and get started with. When talking to the e-commerce merchants, like we always say, like with Sales Manager, because obviously we do marketing automation, we do segmentation for to flag the people that are constantly spending and not and are returning everything and are an operational cost to your business. Do you think there'd be uproar if e-commerce merchants could start like blackballing end users, and like you could block people from ordering because they've sent so much back to a certain value? Because I really like the idea, but I get a lot of...
First of all, I want to commend you. 46 minutes in before you mentioned anything that was salesy about Sales Manager. So anyone that's listening now, that's impressive. You must have been biting your tongue. But no, I don't personally, I don't think so. Like, fraud software does it all the time, and we don't see it. You know, there's blacklists there, they've got known addresses, they've all these things that happen automatically. If you've got that customer, I mean, that's, to me, that feels like a sensible approach. And you know, with the rising cost of business, I think we need to start taking pragmatic steps like that, and being a little bit more selfish, because otherwise you're going to have more and more people talking about administration or job losses or all those other things that we see so frequently in the media right now that we can start avoiding. So I think more blackballing, actually, I think that should be the email that goes out after this, how to blackball your customers. And I think it's an attention grabber. But no, look, in all seriousness, I think it's fine. I think if anyone ever challenges it, you're blocking a behavior that's detrimental overall to your business, and that doesn't really have a place in polite society.
Yeah, nice. Well, did you just want to do a quick wrap up? I know Ellie's got some questions as well from LinkedIn. So did you want to do a quick summary? So anybody that is watching, what key takeaways they should take from this?
I think that there's so much best practice out there that if you want to go and figure things out, you know, there's great resources like LinkedIn, there's YouTube videos, there's something there for everybody to go and figure out whatever it is. I think it's to sit down and do that diagnosis piece correctly. As I said, that you've got to figure out what's the problem in your business. Most people that I talk to, they say, we want to grow sales by 10% over the next 3 years. And that's their strategy. That's not a strategy. That's an output of your strategy. The strategy might be that we want to reduce our production costs by 15% over the next 3 years to give us an extra 3% margin on the bottom line. Or we want to invest, you know, 10% more in technology annually to reduce our operational costs of our business for the next 5 years. So I would say, to create that diagnosis, sit down really and start mapping where that awful question, where do you want to be in 3 or 4 years? I think within reason, most people can do that. And you can start saying, okay, well, what are the things that we then need to do? You've got to consider people, you've got to consider technology, you've got to look at culture, and you've got to start creating that vision from a leadership level. I don't think it can happen without people being fully bought in and really understanding what it is that you can achieve. Final part of all of that, technology has become so ubiquitous to us all, and we use it all day, every day, that, and as you said, the app marketplaces on some of the platforms are absolutely enormous and can be overwhelming. it's about being, I suppose, a little bit curious. You can't break technology anymore. You know, it's so easy to go in and trial it. I think we should spend time upskilling ourselves and seeing by being able to use automation software as an example, how much time can you save yourself in your week? And then can you use that time to do something that you're currently stressed out about? And all of these things have a ripple effect. And I think they're going to be so important to us as we go through the next 12 months, where cost pressures are going to continue to be there. There'll be new channels opening. It's going to be Christmas before we know it. I've had 2 Christmas meetings and my first Christmas party invite in the last few weeks, so I'm excited. But I think we've really got to start creating a sense of accountability around how much we want to adopt technology and what type of e-commerce we want to engage in. That was the point that I was trying to get out at the Primark discussion earlier on. I think we've got to figure out what bit of it works for us, and then put all of our effort into making that a really, really awesome customer experience. So put yourself in that customer experience, that customer seat again, and work backwards from there. And if you take yourself out of that, it becomes a little bit easier. Hopefully that was a reasonable wrap up. And if there's any questions, I don't mind answering.
No, that's absolutely brilliant. No, it's been a pleasure. I could talk e-commerce practices all day, every day. But no, Ellie, you had a couple of questions on LinkedIn.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Vinny, that you've raised so many interesting points and insights. It's just such an interesting topic to talk about. And I always say that it doesn't matter which industry you're from, it's always worth listening to and talking about. So thank you so much. We have got a few questions. I'll read out the first one that's come from LinkedIn. And it's talking about putting yourself in customer shoes. Mm-hmm. We know that consumers are different from each other, like very, very different from one another. The question is how to implement hyper-personalization in fashion e-commerce, knowing how different every single consumer is from each other.
I think it's deciding what does personalization mean in that space. Is it that you want to create a curation tool? So if you want to show different customers different products at different times a day, there are tools that do that. But I think you've first got to define what's that personalization aspect that you want to solve for them. Or is it on-site communication? Do you have a product like Lego have this amazing gift finder on Toys R Us Canada, where it allows you to go down through like who you're buying for, what do they like, what are their interests, how much do you want to spend. So it takes you on this guided navigation tour, which I absolutely love because it makes that process of buying a present so easy. So I think in terms of what you do to solve that is figure out what it is that you're trying to personalize for them. And then you start, again, working backwards. Yes, you know, everyone's different, but you'll put in some parameters and say, this is how I want the tool set to behave within this group. Maybe give it a different set of rules for another group. And then leave it open to see what you learn along the way. And I think you've got to be open to learning and not decide you have all the answers on day one. So figure out what it is you want to personalize and then build around it. Some of the simple things that people have done is the introduction of payment methods. You know, multiple payment methods allows people to spread the costs over time, or they might just want to pay with you know, part cash, part card, whatever that might be. So the personalized experience is definitely going to be different. So figure out what you want to personalize.
Nice, thank you. And we've also got another question from Zoom, and it's a technology question, which they've listed themselves. It says, what is the thinking around how e-commerce / fashion brands are managing AI and ultimately GPU utilization for efficiency around training AI, rendering, and then inference?
So there's a couple of parts. If you put that in chat, I can read the second part as well.
Sure, yeah.
So kind of taking them in two parts, Ashley, and feel free to jump in at all. Could you just reread that first part for me? Oh, there it is. So what is the thinking around how e-com fashion brands are managing AI and ultimately, I think it's GPT utilization for efficiency around training the AI and rendering and then the inference? So I think that there's a couple of things that I've seen people doing. And first of all, they're trying to use AI to generate better content. So they're trying to create product-led content where it's very hard to get hold of. So they're using the tool sets to do that and improve productivity in the hope that there's some sort of SEO benefit. I think that's a challenge, particularly in fast fashion, where the fashion cycles are so quick, it becomes really difficult to gain the benefit. So you're probably replacing one manual task with another one, or you're adding a layer of work in without really understanding what the core problem is. The utilization of it, I think it's going to come further up the line. I think manufacturing companies and manufacturing partners will start using it to create better data and and more enriched data to create better tags. That's probably the other side of it that I've seen. The bigger platforms are using tools like that to create better post-sales data sets and say, can we interrogate it in a different way? And that's where I see most of the interesting side of it happening at this point in time. I don't think it's evolved enough for it to be doing anything else on the front end just yet with the products themselves. I think at a customer experience level, probably the most impactful place that we always forget about is in live chat. That has come on leaps and bounds since then. I know that there's a number of the live chat platforms are almost fully AI driven now, and they allow the conversation rendering to happen in real time and the AI bots to learn in real time. And I know you guys have deployed quite a number of those areas or technologies as well over the last while. That is definitely something I see as being useful. It's better than the previous version of chatbots. It's searching the web or your website for different answers and real-time responses. So I'm interested to see how that service layer becomes really, really important or better, I guess. Anything you'd like to add, Ashley?
Yeah, I think obviously, well, as a marketer, we're all seeing AI driven like personalization. So you've got the perks, and interesting you say about like live chat. So you've got obviously personalization at scale. So when you have got a vast database, machine learning algorithms can analyze enormous amounts of data and segment them. And going back to what Vinny said about actually understanding what your goals are that you want to achieve within the business, rather than just like throwing segmentation around. So you can really enhance hyper segmentation, understanding consumer interests, behaviors, what their desired actions and responses are. However, the downfalls obviously on the over-reliance on AI can hold like immense promise, and it's obviously crucial that you still need that human creativity and touch within the technology. So really striking that balance. But I know like we actually have an AI design studio, and that the idea of that is it's creating great content fast. You can also use it for like localization. So if you've got a website in 30 different languages globally, you can tailor all of that. And also now you've got obviously like the DALL-E tool and the imagery, you can really translate the images into what end users are looking at as well. But I still think you still need that human element of overseeing everything before anything's approved and is being sent out.
And just as you say that, probably the other interesting iteration of it is for split testing. So using the information coming through from a user experience to then create a split test and segment a portion of your traffic going into that space as well to see, do you get a better result, and allowing AI to do that. And that's relatively recent, but I could see a lot more of that being rolled out quite quickly.
Thank you, guys. I know that was a big question, so thank you for sharing what you know on that one. I've got a couple more minutes, so I think this might be a nice wrap-up one, fairly simple. How can we gain trust once loyalty is broken in relation to conversations we've been having today?
Probably more difficult than the technology question. Thanks for that, Ellie.
In a nutshell, yeah.
We had a measure in eBay called bad buyer experience, and what it was the cost it's going to get, the cost to the business of bringing a customer back to the website to make a purchase in the event they had a negative experience. And you got to remember in eBay, the negative experience could be you might be happy with the overall product, but you might have thought it looked different, so you left 2 stars out of 5 for item not as described, or you might have been unhappy with the communications, or you know there's all these subjective factors. So you had multiple ways you could do it. In terms of so I suppose for me, I've always been aware of that cost side of a bad experience. In terms of getting it back, I don't know that you can actually win back loyalty. I think what you can do is solve whatever problem has been had at that time and do it as satisfactorily as a customer wants. But it becomes increasingly difficult to then become front of mind, particularly in a world where, you know, fashion is so substitutable. It's different if I've got an insulated tent where they're not going to get one anywhere else because they don't really exist. So they're stuck with me, and if they need, you know, extra accessories for it, that's them screwed. So if we come back and deal with this a-hole over in Ireland, and that's what they're stuck with. But I don't know that you can earn back loyalty. Ashley, I don't know what you think.
No, I think loyalty is a funny one, isn't it? Because, and even obviously we all know it as like as being buyers, but loyalty I think is so based on emotion and your feeling towards the brand, and but also there's different types of passive and active loyalty. So you get your true loyalty, like optimizing your experience, cult loyalty, where it's optimization of the sense of belonging to a brand or a club or a scheme. Inertia loyalty, so like what are the change barriers, has the brand done something, which is more transactional. And mercenary loyalty, like optimizing incentives. And I was just trying to think if there is any like personal brands that I've had that situation with, but I don't think there is. But I think it's really, really hard. As Vinny said, I think you can solve the issue, the problem that customer has had, but then to rebuild that trust and relationship again is very hard.
One of the most powerful stories, just to kind of take a final point on that I learned during the lockdown or the pandemic, I listened to Noel Mack of Gymshark talking, and he said that because they were an influencer-led community, the first thing that they did was empower all of their influencers to create their affiliate scheme through at-home workouts and things like that. And then through social listening, and he said it was as simple as look at the conversations Gymshark customers were having. They learned that people were suffering from mental health issues very quickly into the pandemic, so 2 or 3 weeks in. So what they did was they started creating yoga sets, and they worked with a whole new set of influencers to try and help people solve within that space. So the point I'm getting to is I think loyalty is so hard to gain that when you've lost, you can maybe solve that one issue. But I think being more proactive and saying, well, actually, let's start genuinely listening to what our customers are saying and how they're feeling about stuff. And if we've got a genuine set of brand values, then we can match to that really, really easily. And then it becomes easier to solve the problem when it occurs. And you don't have to fight as hard for someone to come up with a resolution. They'll generally work with you on it. So I think by being that bit more proactive, you have an opportunity to just be in a better place when things do go wrong.
Amazing. Thank you so much, guys. And thank you for answering some tricky questions, but ones that we can definitely all learn from. This has been an amazing hour hearing from you both. So thank you so much. And to our attendees on Zoom and LinkedIn, thank you for spending the afternoon with us. You will have this recording sent out to your emails very soon. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Ellie.
Guys, have a great afternoon.
Take care. Bye.